Raid on Bruneval is a solitaire game that comes with the last issue of Victis. In this game you play the role of the allies in this raid, in this reproduction of a raid that took place in World War II with the attempt on the part of the allies to steal a German raider so that the allies could study it, and the allied units part dropped on the base, stole the raider, and then they left the base thanks to boats that approached the area as the action was taking place. Very nice, very interesting raid. There could be an action movie in it, and in this game you're going to try to reenact what the allies did, and of course you're trying to be successful to manage to accomplish your mission with the lowest possible amount of casualties on your part. Let me show you how the game works now. This is the map of the game. As you can see, it is a point-to-point map, and what you see here is the setup with some German units that are placed on the board by default face up at the beginning of the game, and then you have some cheats here that are placed on the map following the indications printed on the map itself, and you place them face down after you select them randomly from the corresponding pools. Then these cheats will be activated during the game by your units that are launching attacks against those units, or simply by units that get in range of those units. You have to roll to determine whether or not that location is activated. Also, enemy units that move to an unactivated location activate that location. When such a location is activated, you simply reveal the cheat and you replace it with the corresponding number of German units right there, like that. What's the general idea of the game? Well, you have three groups of units. Each group has a leader and then several units. Each unit is a two-step unit, so it can take two hits before it is eliminated, and the relevant factors are attack, that number there, defense, and maximum movement. Your units will be paradropped on the map during turns 1 and 2. Two of those groups during turn 1 and the third group in turn 2. They will be landing in this area here, and you have to roll a die for each unit to determine the exact space in which the unit lands. Then your units will need to fight their way across the German defenses. The Germans will probably also receive reinforcements. Reinforcements for the Germans enter the game from these two areas here, so they will kind of try to surround you. What the Allies are trying to do here is to pretty much steal this raider here. Your units need to reach the location where the raider is, and then they need to disassemble it, which takes time. It takes at least several turns. Some units are better at this than others, so you have to roll, and different units have different modifiers to determine how fast it takes you to disassemble the raider. And at that point, the raider needs to be brought to this area here, to one of these three areas actually. These are the areas where, starting from turn 10, this is the turn track, on turn 10 you may see your rescue boats arrive. Starting from turn 10 you have to roll to determine whether or not the boats have arrived. If they do, when they do, you place them in these areas here. Now your soldiers can leave, the board can leave the area. Also, your boats have a combat factor, so they can fight against the coastal defenders. And this is the main idea, really. You gain victory points by taking home with you the raider, and that's the majority of points that you get in the game. You will also gain points if you complete side missions, such as destroying that villa there, and or such as kidnapping an operator, a German operator. Also, the units that you manage to bring out of the area alive will give you victory points, and then you will determine your level of victory or defeat based on the amount of victory points that you earned in the game. At the beginning of some of the turns, you will have to roll to determine whether or not there is a random event taking place. After that, it is your action phase, during which each of your units can execute one action. The most common actions are by far moving and fighting, but your unit may also spend its action trying to accomplish an objective or doing other special actions such as paradropping or embarking. But let's talk about movement and combat. Movement. A unit that is stacked with or adjacent to a leader can move up to its maximum movement allowance. Otherwise, the unit has to roll 1d10, you divide by 2, and that is the amount of movement points that you can spend. To reach a location by moving on a solid line costs 1 movement point. That other connection, this type of connection here, costs 2 movement points. And as you move close to enemy units that have not been activated, there is a chance that they will be activated. There is a level of alarm that you keep track of on a track on the board, and that will increase as the game progresses. Different actions that you will perform will raise the level of alarm, and the higher the level, the better chances the German unactivated units have to actually become activated and to join the board. If your unit starts its turn adjacent to an enemy unit, that unit can choose to attack. Now, when you're attacking, you have to take in consideration mainly the unit that is on top of the stack. That is the unit in first line, it is the unit that will attack, and also the unit on top of the stack of the defender will be the unit that will be mainly defending, and that will take a hit if a hit is inflicted on that side. When you're resolving an attack, you roll 1d6 and then you add several modifiers. The first of which is the attack factor of the unit that is on top of the stack that is attacking. Then you add +1 for each step of infantry stacked with the first line unit. Also, you have +1 if there is an officer with you. Only the allies, so that means only you have officers, the Germans do not. The defender also gets to roll a die and to add several numbers. One is the defense factor of the unit on top of the defending stack, +1 for each step of infantry stacked with the stacked in the defending stack. And then you also have the +1 for officers in case you are defending and there is an officer stacked with your unit. Also, a defender may get to use a terrain modifier. Some areas, for example, these ones marked by that symbol, also give a defensive bonus to units that are defending there, but not all areas grant that bonus. You compare the two results, so the modified roll for the attacker and the modified roll for the defender. Whichever group has the total highest number will get to inflict a hit on the opponent, and the opponent loses a step from the top unit. So a full unit will be reduced and a reduced unit will be eliminated. This is also why after combat you may want to reorganize your stacks to decide which unit is on top, and you have to automatically reorganize German stacks so that the strongest German unit is always on top of the stack. And in case of a tie between the total combat factors, the attacker wins and the defender loses a step. And this is pretty much how your turn works, again, with the exception of very specific things that you're trying to do from time to time with special actions. Then, after you're done with your actions, it is time for the Germans to act, and simply for each unit you will implement a list of priorities that you have to go through. That is what is animating the AI here. Simply there are actions that the Germans will try to do if possible. If not, you go down the list until you find the action that best applies to the situation. In general, the Germans will try to attack your stacks if they can, otherwise they'll try to move against your stacks, and in some other circumstances they may try to move towards the radar or towards the beach from which you know that you're going to leave or you're trying to leave. There is something that is left to be desired in the rules. The rules have some gray areas and omissions and things that seem to be implied that as you read the rules and then as you set up the game and you start playing, just there are situations of uncertainty where you have to do some work of interpretation and maybe you have to house rule things here and there. I also think that there are certain rules that you simply will have to tweak with house rules. Otherwise, there are just situations that seem to be too strange, too weird. I'll explain in detail if you want to know. Send me a message. I'll explain in detail what I mean here. I will get too technical here. If you haven't played the game, you do not need to know this at this point. It's just that the rules seem a little undercooked. I think more work would have been desirable before these rules were released. As for the game itself, it is not a terrible game, but it is not a very good one either, in my opinion. It is not a very exciting game. This is the problem. I love games that have a strong narrative, and this one does have a narrative, does have a very clear story, and maybe a little too much, a little too clear, a little too strong. There is such a fine line between strong narrative and script, and I here have the sense that the overall experience is pretty scripted. There is a very strong, a very well-defined sequence of actions that you have to go through in the 13 turns of each game. You power draw, you fight your way through the line of German defenses. You may have to strengthen your flanks because of reinforcements that arrive at the end of the German turn, but at the end you're converging towards the raider. Some units will spend some time to break down the raider and its components, and then of course you have to clear your way to the beaches to leave the to leave the area. But this is pretty much what happens. You adjust the minor things here and there depending on where you land exactly and on the number of German units that appear in specific locations, but the overall narrative is pretty much there. It is pretty much the same from game to game. But it is not just a matter of replay value. Even within a single game, even when I was playing my first game, I already had the sense that the structure of the game dictated my actions a little too much for my taste. Not many areas where you can move, not many connections, not many choices. Things felt a little limited, a little claustrophobic. Also, it just seemed that there weren't really tough decisions to make, high-stake gambles that you take in your exciting scene, whether or not they're going to pay off. Usually the next best thing appears to be fairly obvious. The next things that you have to do, even if it is not ideal, appears obvious too. So you're just following along and seeing what happens. But I just didn't have that sense of being grabbed by the game and being really, held there to see what happens and being excited to be part of this experience. I just felt that I was following the script, going along with the game, and that was pretty much it. So it is not a game that excited me, and this is of course a problem. This is of course a minus. It did give me a clear picture of this event about which I knew nothing, so of course from the point of view of historical knowledge it is always better to experience that event than not to experience it. It is always better to know something than not to know it. But apart from that, the game didn't bring me much joy in terms of game experience. The magazine is good. The magazine that comes with the game is pretty good. A lot of interesting articles and reviews as usual. The magazine is in French though, so that's of course a limitation for some readers. The magazine comes with a set of rules for miniature gaming of battles of the 30-year war. So if you're into miniature gaming, I think this issue of Vivictus is going to be particularly interesting for you. But this is a situation in which the package, magazine, and game is not as attractive as other packages that Vivictus offered in the past. I usually always get the magazine with the game, but I know that some people before getting a magazine consider, should I get the magazine only or both? Well, I think this is a case in which the game is not unmissable. This is a game, it is a case in which I think you can just go for the magazine and be happy, just because the magazine is very good and the game to me is not nearly as good.